then you see what they have to do to get anything done and the amount of bureaucracy and red tape and the hoops they have to jump over. It's amazing. They get a tremendous amount of work done, really. You know, their days never end. So
Get work done in spite of.
So what?
We get work done in spite of, right?
I don't know. I don't want to say in spite of it. It's just that your days are for people who think that people who work in government are just sitting back and drinking coffee all day long. They're absolutely wrong.
Don't show up your coffee.
Well, it started. The filming has started, but,
We do not
we
have a
need
quorum.
Chuck.
and we need 4 people.
We need-
don't have a
Ah.
Camille indicated she'd be attending, so we should have 4. And Peggy, we did not hear from.
Here comes Chuck.
Oh, there's Camille. Hello.
There's Camille.
Okay, it started to film.
So I will wait for Camille and then gavel it in. Gavel it in.
Good morning.
You ready?
Yeah.
Good morning. Today's meeting of the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board is called to order. Welcome to everyone. The agendas of today's meeting are on the wall at the entrance to the chambers. Please remember to turn off your cell phones. To ensure a complete record of the board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. We'll take a roll call. Will the board members please introduce yourselves and state the fields you represent?
Good morning, Camille Hepting with Clearwater Ferry Services. I represent the employers in the city of Clearwater.
Kevin Chenault, representing the nonprofit industry.
Pete Scalia, I represent the homeless people.
Gabby Camacho, Habitat for Humanity. I represent affordable housing.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes of the board's December 10th, 2019 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review them? May I have a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion.
A second?
Okay.
Discussion? Anyone? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Minutes are approved. Item number 3, citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda. If there is anyone here to speak to items not on today's agenda, is there anyone here to speak on items not on the agenda? No? Seeing no one come forward, we will move on to the next item. Item 4, new business. Item 4.1 is the election of officers. Mr. Lane, I understand you have some information to help clarify the board's options under this item.
I do. Our board rules require the first meeting of every year that the board make a motion to elect the vice chair as chair. And Ms. Camacho is currently our vice chair. I know you're chomping at a bit to get your hands on that gavel. We do have another option here. At the first meeting last year, Mr. Scalia was voted in as chair, as vice chair by the board at the first meeting. Later that year, our chair resigned and the board elected Mr. Scalia as chair. So he hasn't served a full term, neither has Ms. Camacho. So if the board chooses, and Ms. Sullivan will let me know if I'm off the mark here, but if the board chooses, you can continue with the current chair and vice chair for the next year.
I make a motion that we continue as is.
I'll second that.
Do we vote on it?
It's just 4 of us, so
I guess that motion carries.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We may come to the board a little bit later this year to modify some of those rules. They're a little old. We'll take the advice from the clerk and we'll see what we want to do. But, you know, to require the board to make a motion that the vice chair come in, that's something that we could change. We could also change the term of the chairmanship to 2 years instead of 1. So just things to consider at a later date.
Does anybody have any questions about any of this? Then the motion is carried unanimously. Item 4.2 is to accept the meeting results from community meetings regarding community needs in the city's neighborhood revitalization strategy areas. Mr. Lane.
Thank you. Chuck Lane, Assistant Director, Economic Development and Housing Department. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your service on this board. Had a couple folks couldn't make it today, so we're a little tight with getting a quorum. So I do appreciate the commitment. We all do. We're in the process of creating our consolidated plan. We call it the CON plan for short, of course. Two of the major components in the consolidated plan are a needs assessment and a strategic plan. Okay, both are centered around four major components: homelessness, housing, non-homeless special needs, and community development needs. Okay, a very important part of our planning process is community engagement. So what we've done is we've arranged and we conducted 3 community meetings. One was with our North Greenwood community in that neighborhood revitalization strategy area. A meeting was held on February 5th in the North Greenwood Rec Center. The night before, February 4th, we held a meeting and we invited folks from our Lake Bellevue NRSA and our East Gateway NRSA. We had a discussion in that meeting as well. And then on the 27th, we had a sub-recipient workshop. So our sub-recipients are leaders of nonprofit organizations, and they're all very informed. They're on the front lines of the issues that our communities face every day. So we kind of had a captive audience because they were there for grant purposes. So what we did is we conducted a meeting and got their feedback as well. And it was a very healthy discussion. Amanda Warner, who you'll meet later today with Wade Trim, she facilitated those meetings and those discussions. So I'm going to briefly summarize the meeting results and what we heard from the groups. You're going to want to pay attention because the next item, we're going to do the same exercise with you. We're going to ask you the same questions and ask the board to talk about the community needs that you see out there. So the meeting summaries for each of those 3 meetings that I mentioned have been provided to you in the agenda packet. Also, they're made available to the public online. So I'm going to briefly summarize them for you. The first topic we talked about was housing. We asked each group to talk about concerns, needs, and opportunities related to housing. So, clearly what we heard from each of the groups is the undersupply of housing that is affordable for the groups of the folks that we serve. Home ownership, rental rates, both are issues. We heard a lot of comments reinforcing the need for home rehabilitation programs, both home ownership and rental. As you know, we have a home ownership rehabilitation program. We do have the ability to rehab multifamily homes. We don't right now have a program to rehab single-family homes that are rental. That's a little bit tricky for us to do with our funding sources. We heard a lot of comments about the need for our down payment assistance programs. One of the folks at the meeting wasn't aware that we had a down payment assistance program and suggested that we do a better job marketing, which was a very fair comment. We heard a lot about emergency efficiency upgrades. Not only does that help the environment, it helps people with maintenance costs, lower maintenance costs in maintaining their home. And we heard a lot about people wanting to age in place but cannot afford to do so. For example, the retired couple that lives in the home that they raised their family in, and now they're having trouble financially keeping the lights on. So these are folks that need help as well. Then we went on to homelessness. We had a good discussion with the 3 groups on homelessness. We heard about shelters being concentrated in low-income areas, not being more equitably distributed throughout the city. We heard about these shelters being undesirable places to stay. No one suggested that they should be 4-star hotels, but when people choose to spend the night on the street rather than go to a shelter because of the perceived condition of that shelter, that's something we need to pay attention to and understand that issue. A recurring message was about the difficulties of formerly incarcerated folks having trouble getting back into society, back into the workforce. Not a lot of programs out there for that, much less really even sentiment to make that happen. Groups talked about the need for substance abuse and behavioral counseling, along with programs for mental illness. So not a lot of surprises, but it's telling that so many folks are aware of all these issues that we're talking about here. Then we went on to non-homeless special needs. We heard a service provider talk about children aging out of foster care. We actually have a group home in Clearwater that we support. The funds that are used to support that program, they're not allowed to use those funds on children that reach the age of 18. So when they reach the age of 18, whether they're ready or not, they're on their own. So that's a need right there. The need for more food programs, substance abuse programs, socialization programs for seniors, assisted living programs for people with special needs, accessibility improvements like wheelchair ramps. People talked about pedestrian crosswalks, utility assistance programs. There was a good discussion surrounding creating a one-stop shop for community, as a community resource center, helping people become aware of how to find the resources that they need. And then lastly, we talked about community development activities. We talked about making sure our zoning requirements don't prohibit neighborhood scale affordable commercial development, and also implementing incentives to try to incentivize that type of development. We will have, later this year, we'll convene our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, which this board will be a part of. And during that process, we look at our zoning requirements and we try to identify incentives for affordable housing for perhaps this type of development as well. So we'll have that discussion later this year. Of course, we talked about the need for improved transportation corridors. It's tough to have a community meeting these days without talking about transportation. We discussed needed improvements to existing community buildings and activity centers. Folks also talked about our libraries and our rec centers being open longer hours. That was something that was brought up. We also talked about a facade improvement program. We do have a facade improvement program we use CDBG for. The CRA actually has one as well. It's a little bit different than ours. And they talked about public safety improvements, bus stop benches, park improvements. At the Lake Bellevue meeting, they talked specifically about Belmont Park, which is a city-owned park. It's really a grassed field. We're in the process now of planning some improvements to that park, which we hope will make a big difference in that neighborhood. So that really summarizes what we heard at those three meetings. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
I have some questions, but I'd like to hear from Ms. Warner first.
Yeah, that may be a good way to do it, because we're going to go through these very same issues in that discussion. So that's probably a good approach. Thank you. Okay. I think there's a motion.
Anything else, Chuck?
No, I think there's a motion in order because we asked the board to accept.
Oh, then can I have a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion to accept the meeting results.
Second?
I second.
And all opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Accepted unanimously.
Okay, perfect.
The ayes have it. Oh, let me get back. I'm sorry, Chuck. Item number 4 will be to provide feedback regarding community needs within the city's neighborhood revitalization strategy areas and low to moderate income areas. Mr. Lane will introduce our speaker for this item.
So you just heard me talk about the 3 meetings we had. We're going to do the same thing with you. Hope to have a good, healthy discussion regarding these issues. Amanda Warner is in the process. She's our consultant with Wade Trim, and she's helping us right now for the second time creating our consolidated plan. She's also working with the county on creating their consolidated plan, which is really a good thing. It helps us to make sure we have some synergies and really no gaps between what they're doing, what the county's doing, and what we're doing. Amanda's done some great work with us. We're lucky to have her on our team. So without further ado, Amanda Warner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Good morning.
Good morning.
As Chuck mentioned, my name is Amanda Warner. I'm a planner with Wade Trim. We're the consultants working on the consolidated plan for the City of Clearwater's HUD-funded programs. I'm going to give a brief presentation this morning to summarize what those programs are, just so you'll have a better understanding of them and how the consolidated plan relates to those programs and the activities that we've done to date to support the consolidated plan. So go up here. Apologize, I'm just going to open the presentation. All right, here we go. So what is a consolidated plan? So essentially a consolidated plan is a 5-year planning document. It governs the use of federal housing and community development funds for the next 5-year period, which actually starts in 2020. So October 1st, 2020 is the start of your next program year. But since this is a 5-year plan, this spans all the way to the next program year 5 years from now, which is program year 2024. So that's the period that we're talking about. There's really 4 primary functions of this document. The first of all, as I mentioned, is it's a planning document for the city of Clearwater, so it looks out into the future, what may be happening over the next 5 years and how to prepare for it. Additionally, it's an application for federal funds. So in order to receive HUD's CDBG and home dollars, every 5 years you need to complete this program, and it's basically an application to ask for those funds for another 5-year period. So that's part of what we want to accomplish with the consolidated plan. Additionally, it's a strategic plan. So what that means is it's a goal-setting plan. So what are our goals over the next 5 years to achieve with the federal funds that we're requesting? And then it's an action plan. So in the 5-year consolidated plan, there's a first-year action plan that says, okay, what are the goals that we decided on and how can we implement them? And then the action plan portion is the implementation section. So these are the things that the city's going to do within that first year to kick off the next 5-year process. So the plan components, there's a process chapter which summarizes the citizen participation activities that have been completed to date. After that, there's a needs assessment section. Now what Chuck provided earlier, the meeting results, that's really the information that goes into that needs assessment section of the plan. So it informs the needs assessment. The next thing is a market analysis. So looking at data, typically this is data from both the U.S. Census Bureau and then other organizations. We compile that data and then look at the current market conditions of the city. And that market analysis covers 4 main topics. So that would be housing, homelessness, non-homeless special needs, and community development. So we're looking at the market situations for all of those things. So I know it's not quite intuitive that market relates to homelessness, but it really does in terms of wage and things like that. So we're really looking at that. And then basically, all of this goes in together to be an identification of citywide needs and priorities through the data analysis and the consultation with stakeholders and citizens. So that's what we're doing with those. Then the strategic plan section, as I mentioned, sets the goals and priorities for the next 5-year period, so from 2020 to 2024. And then the action plan is the implementation strategies. So that takes the annual allocation that the city will be receiving from HUD and then specifies specific activities that will be carried out using those allocations. So just to give you an idea of the funding sources and what those mean, the Community Development Block Grant is one of the programs that's funded through HUD, and the city receives CDBG dollars. So in program year 2020, the city was allocated from HUD $837,360 in CDBG funding. So that $837,000 is subject to a 15% public service cap. So basically only 15% of those funds can be used toward public service activities, and then 20% of those funds can be used toward administration activities. So those are the 2 caps we're talking about with CDBG funds, so public services and administration. The rest of the funding can go to other activities. So for example, public infrastructure projects, public facility projects, and things of that nature. So the other program that the city receives is HOME. Home Investment Partnerships Program is what that stands for. In program year 2020, so this year, the city's allocated $431,436. That's what the city is receiving from HUD for the Home Partnerships Program. The funds are subject to a 25% match and a 15% allocation to community housing development organizations, meaning that 25% of those funds have to be matched in some way and 15% has to be allocated specifically to CHODO's, community housing development organizations. So there's some restrictions on these funds, as I mentioned, but overall, the funding can be selected for projects designated by the City of Clearwater. So I want to talk a little bit about project eligibility. So these funds are specifically designated by HUD to serve low to moderate income individuals and families. So that is the eligibility for criteria for these projects. So that can be looked at in 2 ways. So one is area-based and one is client-based. So for example, these funds could be used to serve an area that's 51% or more low and moderate income. So low and moderate income is designated as 80% or less of area median income. So just to give you an example, a family of 4 persons living in the city of Clearwater, if they make $53,500 or less, they would be considered low and moderate income. So for an area-based project, so for example, a public facility or something of that nature, to use these funds, you would have to make sure that that public facility is within an area that is 51% or more low and moderate income. Now, client-based just means that the person benefiting from the project would have to fall into that category. So for example, a home rehabilitation project, if the homeowner it falls into that category of low and moderate income, they may be able to apply for that anywhere in the city, so that wouldn't be an area-based project. So just thinking about the area-based versus client-based when you're looking at these funds. Additionally, funds can be used for activities that prevent or eliminate slums or blight. So if there's a neighborhood that needs some attention, these funds can be put towards that. And additionally, activities that meet community development needs having a particular urgency. So for example, if there were a natural disaster, for example, a hurricane or a tornado came through the city, these funds could be used to help recover from that. And just to give you an idea, so the area-based criteria that I mentioned, this is a map of the current HUD low-mod income summary data. So for example, the green areas that you see on the map are all areas that would qualify as low or moderate income areas. So just to give you an idea of where those are areas in which the block group, 51% or more of the persons living in that block group qualify as low or moderate income. So that just gives you an idea of the geographic distribution throughout the city of Clearwater of where those areas are. So the yellow areas on this slide would not be eligible for area-based projects. Now just keep in mind that if it were a client-based project, it could be anywhere within the city. So this map is really only relevant for area-based projects. So what has the city of Clearwater done in the past with these funds? So there's been quite a few activities that have been completed. So for example, public services are typically funded with these dollars. So that could be anything from a food service program to elderly assistance, something of that nature. Economic development activities, housing rehabilitation, home buyer education, down payment assistance, public facilities and improvements, and housing activities. So for example, acquisition or new construction. And the housing activities are typically through the home program. So just to give you an idea, I believe, Chuck, this map refers to approximately the last 5 years of activities or so.
That was created a year and a half ago, and it was the prior 5 years. And it was really just intended to kind of create a heat map of where, where we invest our funds. So you can see the concentrations.
Yeah, and you can see that on this map, you can see that a large number of the activities over the past 5 years have really occurred within the areas that correspond to those green areas. So you can kind of see a relationship to that. Now, things, for example, like a rehab loan may not be within one of those areas because it's a client-based activity, but you can see that a lot of the new construction, for example, really corresponds with those green areas that are income eligible. So just to give you some example of some things that have been completed, Habitat for Humanity projects, those have used these types of funding, directions for living, improvements to their facility. The Beatty Villas, that's permanent supportive housing complex, that's something that was funded with these programs. So there's lots of opportunities to participate in this planning process. So there is a paper survey and an online survey. If you need a paper copy of the survey, please feel free to contact the Community Development Office. Economic Development and Housing Department. And then from there, the paper survey and online survey. The online survey is available in both English and Spanish languages, so I just want to make sure that you're aware of that. If you go to that website and you'd like to fill it out, there's a toggle at the upper right-hand corner that lets you choose the language for the survey. So please take a look at that. Community meetings, as Chuck had mentioned, there's been 3 held to date. 2 were public meetings in North Greenwood, and then in the Lake Bellevue area in East Gateway. And then the subrecipient grant application that has already been held. However, upcoming meetings will be the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board and City Council public hearings. So beyond today, down the road in a few months, there'll be a couple of public hearings. One will be with the NAHAB and one will be with the City Council, and that will be to accept the plan and move it forward. Now there'll also be a 30-day public comment period. So the draft plan will be available in June. That will be available on the city's website and the Economic Development and Housing Department at 600 Cleveland Street. So if you're looking for the draft document, please feel free to look online and take a look at it and provide comments if you have any at that time. Just to give you an idea of the overall schedule for the project, so on January 17th, the community survey was made available online. In February and March, we held the community meetings and forums and the subrecipient and grant application workshop. And then in February, the notice of funding availability period began. That was the application period for nonprofits and subrecipients to apply for these funds if they're looking to use them. That application period will close on March 27th, and that application period closes at 11:59 p.m. on March 27th. On March 27th, the community survey will also close. So we'll basically be shutting down the application process and the community survey at that point because we'll need to go into the next phase of the project, which is to identify projects and then to also tabulate all the survey results. So that'll happen at the end of March. On May 12th will be the first public hearing with the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board, so with you all. That will be on May 12th, and then on June 12th, the 30-day public comment period will begin, and that's when the draft consolidated plan and annual action plan will be available.
And can I add
Yeah.
At our next NAHAB meeting, the applicants will deliver a presentation to the NAHAB board. Okay, it will be most certainly all of our public service applicants and possibly our facilities applicants as well. So next meeting will be a good meeting for you all to learn some stuff that's coming through.
That's the May 12th meeting, right?
Yes, is it May 12th?
Is it April?
I was gonna say, do
I'm
we
sorry.
have one in April?
April.
It's
April?
April.
Okay.
Is it April or May? Because
April
it's
14th.
reading May 12th here. There's nothing listed in April.
There is a meeting May 12th as well, but April 14th.
That's when
Okay.
they're gonna
our next
present,
meeting, and
okay.
that would be the
Applicant presentations.
Okay,
Yeah.
April 14th?
So the applicant presentations will be a regular board meeting, and then the May 12th, the reason that's highlighted is that will actually be noticed as a public hearing. So it'll be a regular meeting, but it'll also be noticed as a public hearing. And I believe that May 12th date is for the actual selection, correct? Once the
May
projects are,
12th
yeah.
is when we approve, the board is asked to approve the distributions.
Yeah.
the
Okay.
allocation.
Right.
And then the subsequent meeting, you're asked to approve the annual action plan.
Yep. Yep. So then moving on to July 12th is when the 30-day public comment period will end. And then July 14th will be the second public hearing. So that will be the public hearing after the 30-day comment period to review any comments that have been received during that 30-day comment period, and then to move that document on to City Council. So basically, I believe you're looking for a recommendation to move it on to City Council at that time. Okay, and then July 16th will be the final public hearing and adoption with City Council. So you all will get to review this document before it goes to City Council, and then either recommend or provide other direction moving forward to City Council. And then August 1st, 2020 is our target deadline to submit the plan to HUD. The document's actually not due until mid-August, but we like to submit it early because, as I mentioned, it is a grant application. So we want to make sure that we get everything in on time, and if there's any concerns, we can address them well before the application deadline. So with that, are there any questions that you may have?
Anybody have any questions? I have one question for you. Do you know, what is the municipal cost? Do we figure the municipal cost is the cost of services per homeless person in the city? Do you have a number? I mean, I have a number that I have researched down in St. Pete and Tampa, and it seems to be about $35,000 per year.
Okay.
It seems to be the accepted number for the entire southeastern region. And I'm just wondering if we look at that number, does that impact any of the decisions that we do when it comes to working with the homeless?
I don't believe that we have a number, although we probably could research it and come up with one maybe for the next meeting, but we certainly provide some general fund revenue to agencies delivering services to our homeless population.
I'm
We also-
not asking that. I'm saying the homeless population, the way it is, it touches the city in so many different ways, right? The police ambulance, fire, rescue, incarceration, court fees, et cetera. And so that's a real cost that comes to the municipality. And my best evidence that I can find, it's about $35,000 a year per homeless person to the city. And my thinking here is only, that's a lot of money. And does it ever come into, when we're looking at dispersing funds, is there ever any consideration given? And I'm guessing really not, because we don't really have a firm number, to how we disperse these funds so they can be the most effective to solve a problem and give, in essence, a reverse ROI to the city. If we can save, I'm using one thing, if you take 40 people off the street, you've saved the city $1.3 million, give or take a shekel here or there. The city didn't have to put out money for that. That's all a good thing. And does that enter into the decision-making anywhere? That's the only there's no right or wrong answer, I don't think. I'm just asking that question. Maybe that is a factor that should be thrown out there.
Yeah, to your point, Pete, so we track data on trespass warnings, things of that nature. So police activity within our homeless population, we certainly could come up with an analysis of how much it's costing us to remediate encampments and things of that nature. The funds we use, general fund revenues, as well as grant funds, which are not municipal dollars, but we could say, this is how much the city is moving toward these populations for these activities. We could probably do a back of the envelope analysis. I think where it gets tricky are all of the medical costs that get associated, which are not municipal costs, of course, but they do impact numerous things throughout the community. And so I think we could probably come up with a fairly decent municipal figure, but there'd be a lot of holes in it. I think probably the better analysis really would be a county-wide one, because under the continuum of care, if we looked at it from a county-wide perspective, we probably have a much more reliable figure.
Do you know if anything like that exists within the county?
I don't know. Gabe is here and may be able to answer that more specifically, since he attends the Homeless Leadership Board, or Homeless Leadership Alliance, I think they're called now.
Right.
So I don't know if that's in any reports that they have. It's not any that I have seen, but doesn't mean that it doesn't exist somewhere.
That's just split so that it's the Homeless Leadership Alliance and the Continuum of Care, right?
Yes.
So Continuum of Care is effectively just starting out,
Right.
true? So-
Well, the continuum of care is effective, has been in place. The Homeless Leadership Alliance, that separation just occurred.
That's right, so they probably really haven't had a chance to even put this stuff together.
I don't know. Kevin, you're on this as well, correct?
Yeah, I'm on the Providers Council of the Continuum of the Alliance, and unless Gabe's heard something through Funding Council, I've not heard anywhere where that dollar amount's been isolated countywide either. Have you heard anything on the Funders Council side?
For record, Gabe Para from Economic Development and Housing. No, we have not even addressed this issue at all that I can remember. It is a very important point to think and move forward, to bring it to the table. But not at the Providers Council, not at the Funders Council. I've never heard anything related to approaching the cost of how much a homeless individual would cost to the city or the county.
So Gabe and I share a seat on the Funders Council. He's probably there more than I am. A couple of years ago, there was an effort, and help me if I'm off on this, Gabe, but it was an effort, really a discussion to try to incentivize the hospitals to make an investment, because in turn, if that investment is successful, it will reduce their costs in serving those folks. So it was kind of a full circle kind of approach. I don't think it gained I don't think it reached a conclusion.
No, it did not get any traction. It was brought up to the table, like some more things that are brought up to different tables with this think tank, but it never moved forward to any concrete solutions or approach to that
Certainly
particular
along the lines of what you're talking about.
Okay, I wasn't trying to do.
No, I think it's a great
My
question
thought
and something we
process is
should be
simple.
looking at.
If we know approximately what it costs to have a person homeless for a year on our street, And we can turn around and say, and I'm not picking or anything, we take Safe Harbor and say, okay, we've got 250 homeless people, just plucking that number out of the sky, and it's costing us $35,000 a year for these people. And the goal should be to get them off the street and back to becoming productive members of society. How's the most efficient way to do that? And so that we are, A, spending the fewest number of dollars to turn around and give us the largest ROI in returns of cutting that money out of being spent in the future. That's as far as my thinking has gotten me, is that there seems to be an equation there that, or some type of ratio that should be worked out somewhere.
I agree, but in my view, I think that needs to happen at the county-wide level under the continuum of care HLA.
I think you're right.
You know, we could certainly contribute to that report, but I think it really needs to be looked at from a broader scale.
I agree with you, Denise. I think it has to be.
I'd be curious to know how St. Pete may have done an analysis and what data they looked at. Maybe we could do a similar sort of analysis using our figures, but I think really when dealing with homelessness, we need to look at it at the countywide level in terms of a dollar amount, because so many of the services are provided across municipal lines. Safe Harbor, as you mentioned, is a great one. Pinellas Hope is another one, and that list goes on. But I think it's important to look at it. It's a great point, Pete.
That's all I got.
Actually, I'm gonna bring this afternoon. We have the new committee from the HLA, which is the Diversity, Inclusion, Equity and Inclusion. Today is the first, really, the second official meeting that we are going to address the inequality of services and race, that it has to do with some issues that HUD would like all the continuum of care providers in the country to address. And I represent the city at that particular committee, which takes place this afternoon. I would bring this up and put it out there.
Thanks.
All right, so with that, I'd like to move on to a discussion now, very similar to the discussion that we conducted with the public meeting attendees as well as the subrecipient stakeholders. So there's, as I mentioned previously, there's 4 main topics covered in the consolidated plan, and that's housing, homelessness, special needs, and community development. So we would just like to go through those topics and get your feedback about those. Take into consideration the information that you heard previously from Chuck today, but then also anything that you'd like to add to that information if there's any insights that you want to bring. So the first topic is housing. So this really covers anything related to housing that supports low and moderate income families. Any concerns or?
Do we have a report of like what we have accomplished in the last few years in our past 5-year plan in terms of like housing, homeless, special needs, and community development, like the funds allocated, you know, what we were able to accomplish in those 5 years?
Every year, we have to produce a report called the CAPER, and that report identifies all the accomplishments in the prior year. So we have that, every year we have that report done.
I don't believe we have a report that summarizes all 5 years, if that's your question.
Yeah, that is.
Well, at this point, it'd be 3 years. We're in our 4th year. It's our current plan, by the way, is currently a 4-year plan. The last round, we did it to align with the county under direction of HUD. So it's an anomaly, but so there would be 3 completed plans under this current 4-year consolidated plan. The next one is due in December that summarizes this current program year. But I don't believe we have a summary document, if that was your question.
Anything related to housing?
Well, I'm just going to make the statement that prior to what Chuck had mentioned before and from that previous meeting, that there's a limited inventory of available housing. But that's essentially the problem throughout the United States right now. It's not just our problem. That's everywhere. The affordable housing is just a problem. There's 2 types of housing, though, that in my mind, that they're limited. One is a family who needs to get into an affordable home just so they have a roof over their head. And, you know, you've got mom and dad are working and they've got 2 kids and they'd like to be able to get into a house that they can afford. That's affordable housing. There's also some type of a temporary housing where you have people, like bridge housing, I guess might be a better term for it. And that's really critical, I can speak for, in this area right now. That's where we have been successful in programs that we've implemented to the point where we have almost used up all of the available bridge housing. So we have this delay getting the people who are now off the streets in a job, trying to accumulate their deposit first and last month's rent. So that 90 to 120 days are eating up a lot of beds while they're able to move on to an apartment. It's a real logistical problem we're seeing out there.
And I agree, Pete. The biggest issue that we see is, and we've said it multiple times, is lack of affordable housing. It's folks cannot afford housing in Pinellas County. We have folks who end up going to a different county so that they can afford housing. Bridge housing is a necessity, but the need for bridge housing really is created because there's a lack of affordable housing.
Right.
If there was affordable housing, we could move folks quickly into that and avoid the bridge housing. Bridge housing's expensive, depending on what you're doing. I know we did it at the Salvation Army for about a year, tried bridge housing in our apartment complex. It was at one point transitional housing. And we had folks in the apartment complex such a short amount of time to turn around and rehab the apartment for the next family was just, in maintenance fees, is expensive. So it would save us a lot of money if we could move them into affordable housing quickly, as quick as possible. From shelter to affordable housing is the best.
I agree with you. It's like a
Yeah.
catch-22.
It really is.
Yeah.
So where's the affordable land right now? Do we have, that's the
Don't you
tricky
know?
question, right? I haven't seen it. That's the problem, I guess, that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So how do we access that affordable land? That's kind of the main thing. And how do we avoid just that, pockets of poverty, around the city instead of just like a broad mixed of housing? So how do we, where do we start? That's the main question, right?
Well, I think we've got two pictures here. You've got the picture of affordable housing, home ownership, but we also have the picture of affordable rental housing,
Yeah.
which are different clienteles. There are some folks who cannot purchase a home yet, even through something like Habitat for Humanity. They're not ready for that, but they need the rental. So we need to be looking at both sides of the coin at the same time.
And one of the problems with the rental is what Peter was saying, it's having to accumulate the deposit,
Yes.
which is not affordable, even if the housing was affordable, so.
But perhaps, just perhaps, if we have programs that are being successful in reducing the people from the street, which is providing a backdoor savings to the city, there's some elements of the programs, the various programs that maybe could be revisited and looked at from zoning standpoints. Maybe there's some zoning variances that could be put in to help alleviate some of the immediate problems. I'm not saying that's the only solution or is the solution, but I think it's something that needs to be looked at. And of course, then we're going to run into NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard, NIMBY. But the fact is, we can't constantly keep trying to come up with solutions over here. And then when we make progress, everything stops because that's a zoning that's a zoning violation, or that's this problem. At some point, there has to be common sense solutions that people can say, okay, these are all real. This is positive. This is working. Now we need to have this, and somebody not sit there and say, no, it's not zoned for that. And it just ends there. The conversation has to continue, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Another issue that we have on housing is landlord-tenant issues. The landlords can do whatever they want, really, basically. Charging late fees without notifying notifying residents, and just, there's multiple things that landlords and tenants have issues with. And if we could just identify those issues and help work, and I know that the Homeless Leadership Alliance has at least looked at that, but they haven't gotten far. I know St. Pete tried to do some of that, and the council was pretty much shut down at that point, and then they looked at it in a different way. So that the landlords have a lot of power in the communities, and the tenants do not.
Yeah, but that almost makes sense. And the tenants, the landlords are the taxpayers,
Yes.
right?
So from an employer standpoint, there's two things that we see. One is what you said, Kevin, which is from some businesses here, up to like 80% of employees can't even afford to live in this county. And one of the issues that is at the root cause of that is because our number one economic driver is tourism, and tourism has a lot of very low paying jobs. So we're asking people to come from a different county to come basically serve the people that come here with all the money that makes Clearwater what it is. And because of that, because of this tourism, all of the property values go up, right? So it's a great thing for the city, but for those that are supposed to be able to live in this county, they can't afford to, which then creates this problem of, I own the land, I'm gonna rent it to whoever, and I can make the price whatever I want it to be, right? Because there's value there. I think we need to look at it that way and say, because we know that we have a need for workforce to live in this county, if we want to keep them here, we should be able to say there's a certain percentage of the city that needs to be affordable housing. There's also something that you started to talk about, which is people think that they have to rent because that's the most affordable thing, but I think a lot of them should know that it's not going to cost them that much more to own, and it's such a better generational wealth creator that there's a lack of education on that. And Habitat's doing a great job, but they can't do it alone. And we have to look at it and say, all these people in these neighborhoods talking about the different problems that they have, do they realize that they could be helped by certain programs to own their own home so they wouldn't have those issues? And that's one of the biggest things.
Well, it's been proven that owning a home is cheaper than renting a
Yes.
home. I mean, all our homeowners, they come from paying 50-70% of their income into renting, and they move into a Habitat home now, which is they're creating that generational wealth, and they're paying less than 30% of their income. So I think that's key. Like, just like you said, Habitat cannot just do it alone, so we need more programs that will satisfy that need for affordable housing and create and market more so everybody understands the programs better. Because the misconception is, like teachers or school drivers, they think they cannot afford that because it's a giveaway program.
Right.
And that's one of the big issues, because people do not apply to the programs because they don't think they can afford the program or it's not for them. So marketing, it's key to these programs, and also like you were saying, like holding certain areas of the city and land for those the workforce that is maintaining the city wealth. So.
And you see zones like the zones that have been noted as redevelopment zones, or whatever the actual name for it is. And you see people that, come in and buy a house and flip a house and try to sell it for double the price that particular community can afford. And I think that's an issue. I think those are the zones into which we should look at and say, if there's 3 single-family homes that are available in one street in that area, why don't we focus on getting families that are already in that community, that are paying an arm and a leg for rent, into those homes, and then help them with a Facade grant or any type of rehab grant, so that they can be in a home that's not falling apart and they can own it in the community that they're a part of, that they want to be a part of.
There are programs there's programs we have where you can't go in and flip a house though, right, Chuck?
Well,
Go ahead, Jack.
if it's a house that we've invested funds into,
Right,
yes, there are restrictions.
yeah.
But on the general market, no,
Yeah.
there's no restrictions.
Other than tax. Yeah, federal government.
No, that's what, I mean, if money's come in, if it's been a government program, that
Right.
prevents that pretty much.
Well, thank you. That was all really good input. So I think now we'll go on to homelessness is the next topic. Any concerns or issues with homelessness that you've seen?
Well,
I know.
I
Where to
seem to
start?
be talking
Where to
a lot
start?
today,
I
but-
know.
What Pete was mentioning earlier, I think it's important to not only to notice, but like to actually go after is the fact that, like he said, if we were to have a countywide number about how much does it cost, then we can say, well, instead of being reactive when it comes to homeless, how do we actually approach it and, create housing and job opportunities and training so then eventually they will become, productive members of society. So I think that's important, it's really important because we continue this trend of just being reactive, creating more shelters, but the idea is how can we not create more shelters when we are providing opportunities for work and, for a living wage. So I think that's important to actually get behind that number and see, okay, well, like you said, it may be just the city of Clearwater, but maybe we look at it at countywide and said, okay, well, this is what we're doing at least in the city of Clearwater. Because that number will be lower. I'm sure it will be lower. It has been proven in other cities that number, it's lower when you actually provide permanent housing and job opportunities and training. So I think that's what we have to focus and not continue to focus on shelter and creating better shelter when we have to move these people out of those shelters.
I
So-
agree. One of the things that Chuck touched on, he said formerly incarcerated people. Think about this for just a second. You're incarcerated for whatever you went to jail for. You're released back into society, and now you have to restart your life. Guess what you are, almost invariably, immediately? You're homeless. Now you have to get started again. This is a serious issue because you either end up a lot of people then either end up back in jail, or negative things happen to them. There's nothing positive happening to people when they're in a homeless situation. So the STARS program, and forgive me for touting something, but this is what I'm pretty knowledgeable of. The STARS program that we have initiated at the Community Kitchen and Resource Center deals with formerly incarcerated people. That's the PERK program. They've kind of been merged together. Since March 1st of last year through 2 Fridays ago, the last graduation, we have taken 41 people that are homeless, either formerly incarcerated or just homeless, off the street, given them job training, gotten them a job, and they have a roof over their head. So it works. The program works, and it can be done. They have to have a little skin in the game, but it absolutely does work. But this problem that we're running into, that I brought up before, is we're becoming a victim of our own success. So it comes back to real common sense answers to some of these questions and some of these problems that we're having. Things work, and more things are successful out there, I have found out. We have, I don't know how many agencies, but I know we must have over 50 agencies that deal with, because I've seen the book, and I know there's got to be more than 50 agencies in this county that deal with homeless people and low-income people. And there are a lot of programs that are working, it seems to me, somewhere, maybe at the homeless leadership, they're not the council anymore, the board anymore, but maybe they can do this survey. It seems to me we should start looking at programs that are successful and building on programs that are successful and have a successful track record versus programs that have been existing out there for a while and are not necessarily productive. They're just administrative black holes and bureaucratic pipelines that just suck money out of the program without very limited results. And I just think it's time that maybe somewhere somebody starts to look at that and start tracing the dollars. Follow the money and say what's working and what's not. I think we'd all be better served in our city, in our community, in our state, if we could do that. That's all I got on that subject. I don't want to be long-winded.
Continuing on homelessness just before we move on, I think if we take some energy and focus on prevention and diversion, if we can prevent somebody from becoming homeless, keep them where they're at, It will save money, it'll save lives, and the same thing with diversion. Once they're homeless, is there a way we can keep them or divert them from the shelter and get them out of that quicker? So I think those are two things that we can concentrate on a little bit in the homeless world.
Well, and it's tied to affordable housing again,
Yes.
because somebody, I mean, a family, it's just one paycheck away of becoming homeless for any medical reasons or any unforeseen activities. So that's the problem. I mean, the two are tied together, and how do we go in front of one before the second happens? So.
Right.
And I think to Pete's point, there's so many different programs that we know of, but when you are a family or an individual and you become homeless, do you know of all these things? Do you even know that you can ask for help, that there are programs out there to do that? And I know that there's a lot that the police department does to communicate to these individuals about what's possible, but there's also something to be said about, you know, if you've been homeless for a long time, or if it's not the first time in your life that you're homeless or something happens, you get out of jail and whatnot, you're not familiar with what's happening and what's available to you, you might also look at it under a more negative light that we look at it and say, I don't know that any of these programs can help me, because that's what people constantly want. People constantly want people into their programs so they can say, here are the results of what we've done, and is that really truly something that helps our residents?
But really, like, seeing each program, like you said, Pete, because I think it's important. We had a case, I mean, St. Pete, there's many affordable housing providers, but when you look at the results are not there. And again, like, Habitat's one of the few that are actually doing something. So how do we, and they're draining the funds, you know, those affordable housing funds, but the results are not there. So how do we get to the bottom of it and either analyze what they need to be helped in order to produce, you know, and get results, or, you know, do we win out and just focus on a few and get some restrictions behind it? So when they apply for funds, there has to be some track records behind it to say, okay, well, you know, yes, the funds will be allocated to you or another organization that actually is producing results. So I think that's important too.
I know this is going to sound funny, but I really think this almost has to be done. There has to be almost a bean counter approach to this. There has to be analytics done on the programs that look at nothing but numbers. You have to remove all the emotion out of it. You have to remove the personalities out of it. You have to remove the politics out of it. And you have to say at the end of the day, here's the spreadsheet. Here's the dollars. Follow the dollars. This is what works. This is what doesn't. And then hopefully the people who are in power who can say that, say, yeah, we need to get rid of this, and we need to increase this, because this is where the solutions seem to be. And I don't know how you go about doing that. I don't have the solution, but I do think it has to be a purely numerical, analytical exercise, and the decisions be based off of that. Again, that's all I got.
One more thing that comes to mind is, and I don't know the answer to that either, but with the diversity that we have in our city, are we making sure that we serve all those diverse groups of people the same way and they have the same opportunities to be part of the same programs, both for housing and for homelessness, actually? That would be a question that I would want an answer to.
All right. Thank you. So next is special needs. So special needs really covers a variety of populations. These are populations that are generally assumed to be low and moderate income. So for example, persons with disabilities, elderly and frail elderly persons that may need assistance. It could be persons living with HIV/AIDS. These are populations that may be considered low and moderate income just based on their circumstances. So with that, I know Chuck went over quite a few needs that were identified during the public input in terms of accessibility improvements, things of that nature. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to special needs?
I think it's the same thing that, it goes with some of the same things that we talked about for homelessness. I think when somebody has special needs, but they're not necessarily aware that there's special programs for that. And when it comes to mental health, it's already a stigma, so I think people have a really hard time just coming out and saying, I have mental health issues and I need help, you know, getting through to whatever I need to get through to. And I think that it's important to focus on the zones that we're focusing on now, but I think it goes beyond, a lot beyond those zones as well, with those special issues.
Everything I said earlier, everything I said goes out the window when it comes to special needs and you're talking about mental illness. It's an entirely separate entity all itself when you're having to deal with people who have mental illness. And I do the best I can each day, but as many of us up here do. But this is something that requires a specialized level of knowledge and experience to deal with effectively. And it doesn't, everything else I've talked about doesn't necessarily apply. Some of it does, yeah. Wherever we're being successful, let's follow up on that. But it's just another element to, another level to the homelessness problem, the overall homelessness problem, the overall affordability problem that just compounds it. I don't even know how to measure it, how much it compounds it.
Anything else? Okay. All right, so community development is the next topic. So community development is really anything that can include public facilities, public infrastructure. So these are neighborhood level projects. So if you think of it in that regard, community development also includes economic development as well. So any comments regarding community development?
I know from the Capers report that I've read,
Yeah.
I think there's from the people I've talked to, that we accomplished a lot in the past 3 years. Could we have accomplished more? Yeah, probably. But I think we're at a wonderful point right now that we're able to look at what we did, look at the things that worked and the things that didn't work, and now looking forward to the next 5 years, have a plan that has gotten a lot of the bugs out. And I look forward to seeing how it develops, because I think we are making progress. For all of the, seems like, negative doom and gloom we talk about, we are on an upward glide path. We are making progress. And you just need to look at the homeless problem throughout the United States and look at it here in northern Pinellas County, and we are not tracking on that same level. We have a much better handle on the situation. We seem to have much better solutions. And you would think someplace like Clearwater and Clearwater Beach would be a natural magnet for people who are homeless. But there's a lot of good going on out there. And I think, it's time to say, hey, good job to the people who did that. The next 5 years, I can only see it being more positive, I hope.
Now, with the full allocation of the Sadowski funds that were not swept, which is a great thing, and the city of Clearwater actually gets direct money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's very early, but do you guys have thought about, what are we doing now that we have all this pool of money?
We're starting.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're trying not to get too far ahead of ourselves because there's still some time left in session, but
Yeah.
I know Chuck's going to speak to that. Do you want to provide some context for those that are not familiar with the Sadowski activity right now? And
Yeah, so just Saturday, we learned that they're going to fully fund not only the Sadowski Act, but all affordable housing programs that are funded through the state budget. That's to the tune of $370 million. The SHIP fund is going to be $225 million. So some context, last year, SHIP funded statewide was about $46.5 million. We got, in our allocation, is $164,000. So this is roughly five plus times that. And I do believe some of that allocation was earmarked towards the Panhandle as well. So there's no really way to know exactly what we're going to get until it's announced. The last time we were fully funded with SHIP, we had about $1.1 million. That was in 2009. So, yeah, it's fantastic. Hopefully this is a turning point, and this becomes the norm of the legislature. It's really a credit to all of the folks that lobbied for this and advocated for this, and there were scores of people that did that. I know our mayor sent a letter to each of our local legislators asking for full funding. He's done that for the last 3 years, probably longer. I've only been at this for 3 years. So you know, the support's been great, and the result is perfect. So, and it's going to give us a lot more ability to do, you know, it won't necessarily change. It may, the things that we do, what it will do, it allows us to do more.
Yeah,
You know, more rehabs, more homes, more, you know, wherever our consolidated plan takes us, you know, we'll look to spend all of that.
Chuck, and for our NAHAB board members, it's certainly up to you, but perhaps in April, it might make sense for Terry Malcolm-Smith to really perhaps present to you sort of what the SHIP funds can do. I think since we've not really had them, we haven't really talked about what we can do with those. And so there are certain buckets that we're required to fill, if you will, under regulation. But it does open up some new opportunities for us in terms of workforce housing that have really been extremely limited for us. And when I say workforce, please forgive me, what I'm referring to is the 80 to 120% of area median income. Our federal funds currently do not allow us to really participate in that. So it opens up that opportunity for us in conjunction with the Penny 4 funds that are now going to be made available through the county for acquisition of lands. So there's some new things that probably we should be talking about. They're not new to us, but perhaps new to you because we haven't had a reason really to talk about that 80 to 120 in recent years. But the SHIP funds do require that you even serve extremely low. There are certain buckets that you need to fill. So I think, Terry, providing some context for that might be really helpful in our next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have a dollar figure by then, know what we're actually dealing
I
with.
think that's a great idea. SHIP is very flexible. It's also very limiting. It's very prescribed in how we use it. So it'd be great for you to understand a little bit better than you do now. So we'll schedule that presentation. We will have a healthy audience in the room because we'll have all our presenters. And it'll be education for them as well. I think that's a great idea.
That would be great.
Okay.
To answer your question, I have a few things. I was just looking at the answers from the different neighborhood meetings for that particular question because I think it's their neighborhood. They know better probably than even we do. What I see most, and that's what makes sense I was going to bring up, is I think that for those neighborhoods that are noted as in need, I think it's important for them to have the same facilities and type of accommodations that the other neighborhoods in the city have. So making sure that, you know, just because everybody knows it's a low-income neighborhood doesn't mean they don't have a library, doesn't mean they don't have a great rec center with a great number of community art projects or things like that. There's a ton of things that we see happening throughout the city and especially at the beach that I'm sure some of the neighborhoods could benefit from. And that's not necessarily expensive things, just things that, you know, make life in the neighborhood a little better. And again, making sure that on the diversity standpoint, making sure that what we give to certain neighborhoods also comes to the other neighborhoods that are a little more diverse.
Thank you.
All right, anything else on community development? Neighborhood level projects, anything else? Okay. Great. Well, that's all I had today. I didn't know, Chuck, did you want to talk about the census or you're good with?
Yeah, I have some things I'll bring up in the direct.
All right, great, okay. All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll be putting together a summary of this information as well that we received this morning. But if you have any questions regarding the input that was received to date, please review those community meeting summaries, and then this information will be incorporated into the consolidated plan draft document that'll be published for comment in June. So, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Item number 5 on the agenda is old business. Does the board have any old or new business to discuss? No?
Well,
Okay. Yes?
new business. I think it is important that we agree that some analytic has to be done behind homeless and affordable housing and the impact of the organizations to see where the funds are going and what is the impact of those funds. I think we need to really get behind it and not only just leave it at the talking level, but actually get some input from the city to see if they can do that analysis.
Can we do anything like that? Can we make a motion for something like that, or is that not?
Sure, you can direct us to see what kind of analysis we can do,
Or if it should be done at
or if it should be done at the county level,
level?
ask us to make a recommendation to the Homeless Leadership Board. Our Alliance.
Does some, you want to make a motion for that?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion.
And I second, anyone to second the motion?
What is the motion?
Let's clarify what the motion
What is the motion?
My understanding is that the motion would be to direct city staff to explore looking at the cost of homelessness per person and possibly expand that to the Homeless Leadership Alliance to do. Is that what we're
That makes
looking at?
sense to do it that
Yes.
way? Yes?
But that was only one part.
That was only
Right.
one part. The second part would be to look at the allocation of funds, maybe in the past 3 years, and see the impact that those funds created by the organizations that where the fund was allocated. Like, to Pete's points, there's many people serving the homeless, but what has been the impact, the real impact, the numbers behind those allocations? So we can get to the bottom of it and decide how are we going to move in the future.
So if I may, before you take a vote, well, I guess that's the motion, right? So if we're at discussion, if I may add. So what you're describing,
I'll need a second.
oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping us straight. So it's important to note that what you're describing certainly is a staff-intensive and possibly costly endeavor. And so when it comes to our current work plan or the cost of delivering our current work plan, it often requires additional approval, so which could mean city council. So while you may be directing or asking us to look at these things, we may have to come back to you and say, hey, we can't look at this fiscal year. We may have to look at it next fiscal year. So do expect some feedback perhaps in the next meeting as to what we can produce with some easy analysis figures already available to us versus what we cannot produce because we don't have funding or staff availability to provide the information that this motion is asking for. That said, it's certainly we can make the request and share feedback from you all with the Homeless Leadership Alliance and have that conversation as Gabe suggested. So just be mindful of that as you take action or have further discussion.
We're still in discussion on this, right?
Yes, you have a motion on the floor in a second.
I think what Denise is saying makes sense, and I don't want to burden the staff with even though I want this to be done, I don't want to see the staff get burdened with this, because I agree with Denise, this should be done on a county level. And I think the people who should be doing this are the Homeless Leadership Alliance, previously the Homeless Leadership Board. They should know this. The fact that they don't know this stuns me. But this should be something that should be directed to them to do. So how can we do that?
And we could inform them, Pete. In other words, we could share with them our data, right? So if they take this on as a project, I suspect the other entitlement communities such as ours or the other communities that are putting general fund revenue into these activities could inform the Leadership Alliance as they conduct this study. But I do feel very strongly that if you want real figures, if you want real impacts, it has to be at a countywide level. There's too much intermingling of funds.
Basically, our motion is requesting two separate things. The first thing, I agree with you, really needs to be countywide. The second thing, which is the analysis of grant funds or funds expended, that could very well be even more labor intensive for city staff.
Right.
So I would just hope that city staff would look at that as two separate issues and provide us with what they can do and what they can't do without that. So
Couldn't we also possibly reach out to those organizations that receive those funds and say we're requesting that you give us a
I don't
number?
think that's practical at our level. I'm trying to sit here and think, it seems to me everybody's in agreement that this is something we'd like to see get done, track the dollars and see how efficiently they're being spent. But I think I defer to Denise, she knows better than I am. I think you got to get to the county level. And I'm thinking that somehow, in order to make it work, what we'd like to see happen, it almost has to get from us to the city council to the county commission. That it goes out not as a, boy, we'd really like to see this happen. we're saying, wait, we need to see this. Not only do we need to see it, you should be asking the same questions, and you should be saying it as strongly as we're saying it. And that should go all the way up so that somebody then, the county commission, I guess, can then say to the homeless leadership board, you know what? They're right. Show us these numbers.
So,
Something like that.
I mean, obviously, yes, Denise, to your point, absolutely, it's gonna take staff time, it's gonna take funds in order to create that, and it's gonna take time. But I think this is a time to say, okay, how do we move forward that goal of creating those numbers so we can then, moving forward, analyze better how to distribute the funds or where the program should be, funded, So, yeah, it's not something that you'll have it next month, it's
Well,
just.
something we can get pretty easily is all of the organizations that we fund through community development, through our CDBG program, we require them to report to us monthly on their accomplishments. How many people they've served, the race and ethnicity of those folks as well. That's something that we have that we can very easily, spit out a report that tells you, what we're doing and who's helping who, how many. And so that really is, to a degree, a function of success. I think last year, I don't want to quote, we served a great deal of people last year through our public services and our public facilities program. It's in the thousands. I don't know the number off the top of my head.
we could certainly roll up those 3 years' worth of figures that we currently have from our current consolidated plan. We could provide that, and we could also provide to you what we've invested in general fund revenues. What we cannot easily provide you are the police funding. What is the cost of transport to Safe Harbor what's the cost of engagement? Well, what about, when they deliver Narcan to somebody who's ODing on the street that they know to be homeless? They're not tracking it in quite those same ways, I'm sure. So there's going to be, as I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion earlier, there's going to be a lot of holes. We could provide to you readily accessible data and say, this is where we're at, but to say that it's a deep analysis would be misguiding for sure. So, we could provide you what we can provide to you and so on. I would suggest that if this is something that you really feel strongly about, we could probably take it to City Council and ask that they pass resolution to the HLA encouraging them to take on this activity. They will tell you they have a funding challenge with doing that, though. I mean, they're in the same boat as we all are, limited administrative dollars and all of those things. But perhaps it will at least gain a little bit of attention, and maybe other cities that are challenged with this very question would have a similar thought process and really encourage the HLA to seek grant funding for a full study to be conducted. That's probably the best way to approach it, because Gabe's standing there while getting it on their radar screen. It does not require action of them. A city resolution recommending action does not require action of them. Only their board can require action of them. So, but it doesn't mean we can't get a voice at the table that has some teeth behind it.
And I think that's exactly where we have to go, Denise. That's the point. Let's get it out there. Let's get that question to the council, who can then turn around and say to the HLA, hey, this is what we'd like to have. At least now there's a door open that we can start speaking about. And it's on the public record.
Okay.
So
So,
the
if I
motion
may,
would
and I
then
know
be-
you haven't taken action on this item, I would suggest that we bring to you some information in April. It'll be very, 30,000 foot, not a lot of great information other than what we can roll up out of Caper. We'll have some internal discussions with our city management about taking it forward to council, and we'll seek direction from you in April as to whether or not we take that forward to council.
So
That make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So should that be the motion, or are we just, yes?
Chuck, do you, before because
No.
I'm basically directing Chuck what to do here and haven't
Right.
even asked him if he can.
In front of him.
No, I agree with that. Let's take some small steps and see
Right.
where it takes us, and then, the board can, come up with another motion later on to really hone in on where we're going. I think the motion on the table kind of covers what Denise just mentioned. I think it gives us some direction. We'll come back to you with some data, some feedback.
So the second part of the motion does not tie your hands too much?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, because I've conditioned it, so as long as with condition, maybe that's the amendment to the motion, is with condition based on available information.
Okay.
And
That's fine.
really the data
Sure.
dive that we'll be doing for you, and that's not really staff intensive.
Okay.
Okay. Then can I have a second on the motion?
We
Motion?
already did,
It's
yeah.
already done.
And All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Carries unanimously.
You guys get a lot done with only 4 of you here.
Item number 6 of the director's report. Mr. Lane, do you have anything to report?
Yes. I have a few items. I'm just going to kind of roll through them, so if you have any questions, just stop me and ask. Ms. Camacho stole my thunder on the Sadowski Fund. We already talked about that.
I apologize for that.
We had, council approved the local government contribution for 2 local housing tax credit projects. One is on Union Street, one was to be at Fire Station 45 in the downtown. Neither got funded with the tax credits, okay, and that's not uncommon. Typically, we see these projects come back year and year and again, so we'll see what happens, but both of those projects right now are not funded, so we'll look maybe to the next year to see if we can get them through. I'd like to talk a little bit about North Greenwood and the new construction we're seeing up there. We're really seeing some good stuff. We donated a property to Emerge Community Development Corporation. We expect construction to begin on that in the next few months. We donated 2 lots to Habitat for Humanity. Aside from those 2 lots, Habitat has 6 other lots in the North Greenwood neighborhood that they will begin building on in the next few months. 2 are under construction now, doing some really good stuff, and those will both close in May, I think, is what I'm told. So we're onto some good stuff. We're working with Clearwater Neighborhood Housing Services on a construction loan. They have a home that's also under construction, I believe, on Roosevelt Ave. So there's a lot going on there. Also on Pennsylvania, there's 2 brand new homes that were actually, to my knowledge, built at market rate. One just closed at $230,000, and it's in the heart of North Greenwood. That is a great indicator that things are improving in that community in terms of the market. Let's see. I want to talk to you a little bit about our list of properties that are available for affordable housing. So I'd like to bring this up on the computer, if I could. So last June, City Council approved a list. Let me back up. We're required by the state as a recipient of SHIP funds to every 3 years produce a list of city-owned properties that may be available for affordable housing. We came up with a list of 13 sites. Okay. So that was 9 months ago. As we are here today, all but 5 of those properties are spoken for. So I think we've done a pretty good job at looking at this. This property here, we are going to go out to RFP to entice a multifamily project. We're waiting until after the election because there's a referendum in the election that we're hoping gets passed. And right now, our city charter allows us to donate property if it's less than a half acre for affordable housing. That referendum allows us to donate up to 5 acres. This is 1 1/3 acres. So it doesn't mean we'll donate it. What it means is it will give us another option in how we go about subsidizing this project. So that's why we're waiting till after next week's election. This property right here, we donated it to Habitat for Humanity, and they built a home on it, and it's sold. A couple weeks back, they had a dedication. That's on South Washington Ave. This property is in the Gateway. We actually had a conversation about a tiny home project on this property. It's not done, but nothing's committed on this site yet. This site we donated to Habitat for Humanity. It's a single home site. If you look at the next one, it's on the same street. This street between Pennsylvania and MLK, it's one of the tougher blocks in North Greenwood, in my opinion, if you're out that way and take a ride down it. So Habitat's going to build homes on those 2 sites, and they actually have a site, if you can see my cursor, right here. They're going to build a home on that site as well. Is that correct, Ms. Camacho?
Yeah, that's Tangerine, right?
Nope, this is actually LaSalle. I believe you're all building a home there. Tangerine will be on a different slide. So we're looking at 3 new homes on a really, really tough block, so it's a good thing. Right here, this is Monroe Ave. That's property's not spoken for. I think it'll probably be donated in the next few months. Just south of here, I think it's actually just south of the screen here, is where Habitat is building the 2 homes right along the Pinellas Trail, which is a cool thing. That's a single-family home lot. We have not. It's not spoken for. The gentleman that owns this home owns this lot and wanted us to do a swap. which we were entertaining, and we were happy to do it. There's some title issues that may prevent it, so we may just end up hanging on to this one and putting a home on it with one of our developer partners. This is the site we donated to Emerge. It's a pretty good size single-family lot. You can see it's just behind the rec center in North Greenwood. This is a Tangerine site. It's on Tangerine and Madison. It's about 10,000 square feet. It's a pretty big site, but because of the shape, it's really only conducive for a single-family home, not more than that. This is Vine Street. This is not spoken for. I think it's 408 Vine. It's a single-family site that we can probably transfer in the next few months. It's a bit of a challenge here. This is a commercially zoned site. We have it on the list. If somebody can figure out a way to throw up some multifamily, we would certainly welcome that, but it's a challenge because of the size and shape.
What is the access on that property?
The access?
Yeah, it's
Just the
in
frontage on.
Just that front?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's a tough site. This site here, along with that site, are the subject of a current RFP that's on the street. We put out an RFP a while back and it failed. We had to reject the bids. One of the bidders actually owns this as well and planned at the time to incorporate this into the project. I do expect that same type of proposal with this next one. I think it's due next week. It's kind of interesting because it's the same zoning, but this part here allows 7.5 units an acre. Down here, it allows 15 units an acre. So when you add the additional land, it brings your density from 4 to about 10. So it could be a pretty impactful project. It's catty corner from Cherry Harris Park. Some new construction right on North Greenwood would really go a long way. So, and I think that's it. So that's the list. It's dwindling. We do have a foreclosure program that we have that may generate some more sites. So, what else to talk about? So I talked a little bit about the referendum. Last thing I want to discuss with you, and every time I have a captive audience, I try to take this opportunity to talk about the census. It's very important. We talked a little bit about CDBG today, SHIP. These are formula-driven allocations that rely on census data. There are every year about $44 billion distributed to Florida that relies on census count data. And the communities we serve with our funds, they're the most likely to go undercounted. And we go undercounted, we go underfunded. Congressional districts are drawn on the census tract results. We go undercounted, we go underrepresented at the state and federal levels. So there's some changes in the census this year, back from 2010. This year, the preferred method is to take it online. That wasn't the case. So that's what they want everybody to do. Starting this month, they're going to be sending out mailings to everybody. Everybody's going to have a unique number. You'll be able to use that number, go online, and apply for the census. All of our libraries will have a dedicated computer just for the census. Nobody can use it for anything other than that purpose. You can use the other computers as well, but there's one that will be dedicated just for the census tract. And if someone has trouble with computers, a staffer will help get it through. Very important that we get this done. What's also very important is what the census isn't. It's not a government dive for your personal information. You give out more personal information when you apply for a driver's license, when you apply for one of our DPA loans. This is not a government dive. It's unlawful to use any personal information generated from the census. So people need to be, hopefully people are get educated on that and have a little bit more confidence than in the past with what the census is. All they're going to ask you for is the number of people in your household, including babies. Babies were undercounted in the last census for whatever reason. The type of residence, your telephone number, your sex, age, and race and ethnicity. And that's it. If somebody asks you for your social security number, they are not a census worker. That is a scam. So let's see what else we got. Non-English speaking residents, there are resources available. So the schedule, in 2 days, March 12th, the first mailing will go out. March 16th, another mailing will go out. The 26th, a mailing. April 1st is Census Day. That's a ceremonial Census Day, although the census lasts through July. You can take it that late. In April, a fourth letter will go out, and then they'll start knocking on your door. The census enumerators will come and they'll try to find you if you haven't responded and try to get your information. Again, look out for the scams. Census worker will have an ID badge with their name, photo, and Department of Commerce watermark. They'll have an official tag, official bag, a laptop or a smartphone. They work between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. You'll see them at community events and things like that. And lastly, if you're looking for a job, the census is hiring. So about $17 an hour. I think the county is handling those types of requests. So please, whenever you have an opportunity, encourage people to participate in the census. It's very important for a lot of different reasons. So that's all I have for the board, unless you have any questions for me.
I have a quick question for you. You mentioned quickly the referendum, but can you just go into more detail about what that referendum question is?
Okay.
And why it's important?
So our charter allows us to donate or sell for less than appraised value property that for development of affordable housing if it's less than a half acre. And that's, so we can donate it or sell it for less than appraised value if it's less than a half acre, okay? Our charter governs our disposition rules for the sale of property. So what this does is it allows us to donate property or sell for less than appraised value, property that's 5 acres or less, okay? So a couple of reasons that's really important. One, it gives us just another tool to help subsidize a project because affordable housing by definition needs subsidy. But the other thing it does that I think is just as important, it allows us to put out an RFP for the sale and development of property. Right now, we can limit the people that can bid on property by attaching conditions to a sale of property. Of the people or organizations that qualify, now that property goes up for bid and it has to go to the highest bidder. Price is the only factor once you have your pool of bidders. We have to sell it to the highest bidder or reject all bids. With this, we can now take property and we can put it out to RFP where price isn't the determining factor. We can put it out to RFP and have the merits of the project be the most effective and most important factor. So that's really what I like most about this referendum. There's another referendum going out that's similarly related where if we have uneconomic remainders of land, we can donate them or sell for less than appraised value to the adjoining landowner. Might have a piece of property that doesn't have any road frontage, right? So our obligation with that piece of property, we own it, we have to maintain it, right? That's our responsibility. If we hadn't, who else is going to buy it? The adjoining landowner might want it, but if they're required to pay appraised value, that might be prohibitive. So now we have the ability to say, hey, we know you're the only person that can maintain this land. Please take it off our hands. And it's just a commonsensical kind of thing. So those are the two referendum questions that I've been involved with.
Do you know what the numbers are? Like
1 and 2, I believe.
1 and 2? Okay.
Yeah. So, thanks for that question. Any follow-up questions on those referendum questions?
No, I love common sense solutions. There.
Again, thanks for your participation. Thanks for your service on the board. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck.
Item number 7 are board members to be heard. Would you have anything to say? I've said enough.
No extra comments.
Our next NAHB meeting is scheduled for April 14th at 9 a.m. here in the council chambers of the main library. And without further ado, the board is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.